Welcome back to Midslit. This is Midulaj. In this video, I am going to discuss about language acquisition and language learning. Language is mastered in two ways. They are acquisition and learning. Let us see what is acquisition and what is learning. Let's move. So, language acquisition and learning. First of all, I am going to discuss about language acquisition. Language acquisition refers to the gradual development of ability in a language by using it naturally in communicative situations. Acquisition is a natural process. Children acquire language through a non-conscious process during which they are unaware of grammatical rules. This is similar to the way they acquire their first language. They get a feel for what is and what is not correct. In order to acquire language, the learner needs a source of natural communication. The emphasis is on the text of communication and not on the form. So that is language acquisition, and language learning is a different thing. Language learning refers to a conscious process of accumulating knowledge of vocabulary and grammar of language. Here, learning is deliberate. Language learning is not communicative. It is the result of direct instructions in the rules of language. In language learning, students have conscious knowledge of the new language and can talk about that knowledge. They can fill in the blanks on a grammar page. Research studies have shown that knowing grammar rules does not necessarily result in good speaking or writing. A student who has memorized the rules of language may be able to succeed on a standardized test of that language, but may not be able to speak or write correctly. So, those whose experience is primarily a learning, one may not have the same proficiency of those who have had an acquiring experience. Even in an ideal acquisition situation, very few adults seem to reach native-like proficiency in using a second language. It may be due to the fact that the innate language faculty of human being is in its full power and vigor in the early years. So, let's move to the difference between acquisition and learning. So, look at the table. So, language acquisition is a non-conscious process. At the same time, learning is a conscious process. Language acquisition is natural, but language learning is deliberate. Acquisition is communicative and learning is not communicative. Acquisition emphasizes on the message, but in language learning, message or form or both may be stressed. So, there is a rapid process in acquisition, but in the case of language learning, there is a slow process. And language acquisition is fully successful, but in the case of language learning, success is not guaranteed anymore. So, in the case of language acquisition, there is no systematic procedure as well, but in the case of language learning, there is a systematic procedure. And when we acquire language, it is not necessary to aware of the grammar, But in the case of language learning, we will become aware of the grammar. So in language acquisition, there is no instant rectification of error, but in language learning, there is an instant rectification of errors. And in the case of language acquisition, there is no help from teachers, but in the case of language learning, we can get a good support from the teacher. So there are a lot of factors that affecting the language acquisition and language learning. So language acquisition is influenced by subjective and objective factors in several ways. Factors related to learner, environment, and infrastructure of the institution play vital roles in language learning. So let's discuss about some factors. First one is need. Need is the greatest prompter and the most influential factor of any endeavor. Second one is aim. The aim set by the learner determines the extent he wishes to go in his study. It influences the nature and quality of learning. So in the case of practice, the quality and intensity and extensiveness of practice influence the acquisition of a language. Next one is age. It is a view widely held that with increasing age there is a diminishing capacity for language learning. Children acquire language quickly and easily, so age is a factor. Next is temperament. The temperament of the students affects learning. He may be imaginative, unimaginative, energetic, nervous, reluctant, or diffident. So temperament is a factor. Next is previous study. So the previous knowledge may facilitate or hamper the progress of learners in picking up a language. Next point is imitation. So ability to imitate is the basic major factor in promoting learning and language acquisition. Next one is attitude. Attitude is a factor. The attitude of learners towards second language can be positive, negative, or neutral. Positive attitude facilitates quick and strain-free acquisition, while negative attitudes hamper it. So gender also plays an important role in language acquisition and learning. It is said that the girls are quicker in language acquisition when compared to boys. Next one is intelligence. So learners' intelligence influences their learning. Next one is aptitude. Aptitude for a subject or career facilitates better attainment in that area. So aptitude matters. Don't forget, aptitude matters. So next one is interest. Interest is the mother of attention and attention is the mother of learning. Interest in a particular subject facilitates the learning of it. So in the case of language acquisition and learning, interest is a factor. Next is motivation. Motivation plays a vital role in facilitating learning. And next one is personality. So the personality of a learner, such as introversion, extroversion, etc., can influence his approach towards language learning. Next one is physical condition. So, physical wellness has crucial influence on language learning. Next one is emotional development. It also influences the learning of an individual, emotional development. So, another one is style of learning and acquisition. Learning style of each learner may have some differences. This style can influence their learning also. And there are some environmental factors including socio-economic status of the family, regional dialect, interaction, exposure, cultural impact of society, attitude of society towards the target language, classroom atmosphere. Classroom atmosphere is a factor. Sufficiency of comprehensible input, place of target language. So, the place of target language in the historical classification may also determine how easily a learner acquires it. For instance, a North Indian whose mother tongue is Hindi may find it easier to learn Punjabi than a Dravidian language like Tamil, Malayalam, etc. So, the place of target language is a factor, and there are some infrastructural factors like competency of teachers and library, computer lab, seating arrangement, classroom conditions. So, those factors also influence. So, നമുക്കിപ്പോൾ അതൊന്നും അത്ര important അല്ല. So, let's move to next slide. So, there are some views on language acquisition. Language development has been an area of focused studies and researches for long. So, several theories have been proposed by psychologists and linguists. Some are of the view that the ability to learn language is inborn. Some others believe that language is learned after birth and is due to environmental factors. The debate between these two groups of psychologists is known as nature versus nurture debate or controversy on language development. So, there are many controversies based on the acquisition of language. The prominent views on language acquisition are based on behaviorist theory propounded by B.F. Skinner and nativist theory proposed by Noam Chomsky, and there is a view of Krashen. So, let's discuss what is behaviorist view. B.F. Skinner puts forward the behaviorist view of language development. He says that language learning takes place through operant conditioning. Language learning depends largely on environment. So, Skinner's theory sees the principles of conditioning including association, imitation and reinforcement as the key elements in language learning. Children learn words by associating sounds with objects, actions and events. They also learn words and syntax by imitating others. Children imitate what they see and hear and learn from reward and punishment. People have a tendency to repeat actions that lead to pleasure and avoid actions that lead to pain. So, here B.F. Skinner says that parents provide more attention and pleasurable reactions when the infant makes correct words. As a result, those words and phrases are remembered. This way, the child gradually learns to speak and use language. the child responds to the smiles and approval of the parents. Skinner explains this as operant conditioning, the reinforcement of random response by a reward. Through trial and error, the child learns to communicate. Adults shape the speech of children by reinforcing their utterances that sound most like words. So, the behaviorist view of language learning has been sharply criticized. A language contains countless numbers of sentences. All these sentences cannot be learned through imitations. Children acquire language skills even without being grammatically corrected by the adults. Children make errors such as overgeneralizing verbs. For example, a child may say, Sanoj goes to Calicut, or Sanoj goed to Calicut, incorrectly adding the usual past tense ed to go. So, the past tense of go is went, but the child used goed, G-O-E-D, instead of went. So, errors like these can't result from imitations, since adults generally use correct forms of these kinds of words. The rapid rate at which children acquire language too challenges the behaviorist views. Skinner doesn't consider the complexity of grammar which cannot be explained through mere imitations of parents. So, this is the view of Skinner. So, the rapid rate at which children acquire language too challenges the behaviorist views. Skinner doesn't consider the complexity of grammar which cannot be explained through mere imitations of parents. His theory reduces human beings to mere machines, or at best bundles of nerve endings responding to eternal rewards and punishment. So, this is all about behaviorist view by B.F. Skinner. Next, let's move to Chomskyan view. Noam Chomsky is one of the important linguists, and Noam Chomsky is of the view that biological influences bring about language development. Biological factors influence the language acquisition of human being. So, that is his findings. Humans are biologically set to pick up language. This perspective is called nativist perspective on language acquisition. Chomsky argues that human brain has a system called language acquisition device, LAD. So, the LAD is an inborn the LAD. So, I said about LAD, the language acquisition device. So, Chomsky argues that human brain has a system called language acquisition device, and it is an inborn mental faculty in children that facilitates language learning. It is the set of rules about language with which a child is born. It contains knowledge of grammatical rules common to all languages. It makes the children receptive to the common features of all languages. The LAD is activated when the child enters the world. It is responsible for the order in which learners learn structures and also for the mistakes during the process of learning. Chomsky later used the term universal grammar by replacing the term language acquisition device. He later described language acquisition device as universal grammar. അതിനെ അദ്ദേഹം പിന്നീട് വിശേഷിപ്പിച്ച ഒരു പേരാണ് ലാംഗ്വേജ് അക്വിസിഷൻ ഡിവൈസിനെ ലാഡിനെ അദ്ദേഹം വിശേഷിപ്പിച്ചതാണ് യൂണിവേഴ്സൽ ഗ്രാമർ. സോ Chomskyan view of language acquisition is substantiated by upholding some sound points of reason. Children's language development follows a similar pattern across cultures. The stages of language development occur at about the same ages in most children, even though different children experience different language environments. Children generally acquire language skills quickly and effortlessly. So all these testify to the existence of an innate potential in children for language acquisition. So according to the view of Noam Chomsky, language acquisition is natural and human being possess a kind of innate ability to acquire language. So final view is Krashen's view. Stephen Krashen sees no fundamental difference between the way we acquire our first language and subsequent languages. He says that humans have an innate ability that directs the process of language learning. Infants acquire their mother tongue simply by listening intensively to the utterances of others. Other languages can also be acquired in the same way. So Stephen Krashen synthesizes his theories of second or foreign language learning and forms a theory called monitor model. The theory by Stephen Krashen is known as monitor model. Don't forget the term monitor model. The monitor model has 5 components. They are the following. First one is natural order. Natural order is the first component of monitor model propounded by Stephen Krashen. So natural order is learners acquire a language in a predictable order. This order does not depend on the simplicity or complexity of the grammatical features involved. They acquire single words and string them together. So they acquire single words and combine them together. They focus more on meaning. So this is natural order. Second component is acquisition and learning. The two important systems we use to learn a language are acquisition and learning. നമ്മൾ ആദ്യമേ അത് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞതാണ്. Acquisition is a subconscious process of developing ability in a language by using it. And learning is a conscious process of accumulating knowledge of vocabulary and grammar of language. Third component is monitoring. Students use the rules of language they learned to correct their expressions. That is monitoring. Fourth component is input. A language is learned by comprehending the input that is a little above the current competence level of the learners. Language acquisition is the effect of sufficient comprehensible input. It implies that the language exposure given to the learners should not be too above or the same level of the people's current learning level. So that is input. And fifth component is affective filter. Comprehensible input will not result in language acquisition if that input is blocked before it can reach the brain's language processing faculties. So Stephen Krashen says that a block may emerge between the input and the part of brain that deals with the language. Efficient processing of the learning input is thus defacilitated. So Stephen Krashen names this block as affective filter. Don't forget the term affective filter. An affective filter can be defined as a mental block caused by negative emotional factors or experiences that prevent the input from reaching the language acquisition device. It is activated by the emotional factors such as boredom, anxiety, tension, fear, and low self-esteem. So that is all about affective filter. So experiments show that the blockage can be reduced by weakening the negative feelings. This can be achieved by creating interest, providing low anxiety environments, and boosting up the learner's self-esteem. So Krashen's monitor model is highly effective in language teaching. So the teachers of English should ensure that the students get sufficient comprehensible input. Stress-free atmosphere is to be created for language learning. So this is all about language acquisition and language learning. So let's wind up our module 1 in the paper Introduction to Linguistics. I will be back with another video. So thank you. Bye.